Greetings, everyone. Welcome to USDA Rural Business Cooperative Service Higher Blend Infrastructure Incentive Program Overview, Enrollment, and Orientation. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Karama Neal, your Administrator for Rural Business Cooperative Service. Dr. Neal?
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all, and I'm so grateful for your interest in the Higher Blends Infrastructure Incentive Program, or HBIIP. The Biden-Harris administration is committed to boosting U.S. energy independence, fighting climate change, and lowering fuel costs. Under the leadership of Secretary Vilsack at the Department of Agriculture, we are playing a key role in these efforts through loan and grant programs that help heat homes, run businesses, and power cars with renewable energy from wind, solar, and homegrown biofuels. We understand that rural America is central to reducing our reliance on fossil fuels and giving Americans cleaner, more affordable options with homegrown biofuels. Some of you may remember that in December 2022, USDA made available $50 million in Inflation Reduction Act funding to expand the use and availability of higher blends of biofuels through the Higher Blends Infrastructure Incentive Program. Last month, Secretary Vilsack announced the first awardees from that tranche, 59 infrastructure projects that will receive a total of $25 million. More awards will be announced soon. These grants will lower out-of-pocket costs for businesses to install and upgrade biofuel-related infrastructure and equipment such as pumps, dispensers, and storage tanks. Today, we are discussing the application process for another $450 million in grants through the HBIIP program. We are particularly excited about this opportunity because approximately 96% of vehicles on the road today, approximately 290 million vehicles, are legally approved to use E15. E15 is approved for use in cars, SUVs, pickups, vans, and other light-duty vehicles manufactured after the year 2000. In addition, there are more than 22 million flex fuel vehicles in the road in the United States that can use ethanol blends up to E85. And all diesel vehicles can operate on B20. Though these coming HBIIP grants will continue to support the infrastructure needed to lower out-of-pocket costs for transportation, fueling, and distribution facilities, to install and upgrade biofuel-related infrastructure. And this funding will support a variety of fueling operations, including gas stations, convenience stores, larger retail stores that sell fuel. These funds will also support fleet facilities, including rail and marine, and fuel distribution facilities, including home heating oil distribution centers. To date, USDA has already awarded nearly $75 million in grant funding under the HBIIP program. That translates to over 1 billion gallons of additional biodiesel and ethanol that will be sold annually across the country. So one can imagine the impact this $450 million now available will have for farmers, the rural economy, and for hardworking Americans who ultimately pay the price when we allow on volatile fuel sources from overseas. So again, and thank you for being here. Without further ado, let's learn more about this new opportunity from our next speaker. And so for that, I'll turn to my colleague, Jeffrey Carpenter. Jeff?
Thank you, Dr. Neal. I think many of you probably know me. I'm Jeff Carpenter, the program manager for HBIIP. Today, we're going to do this overview and enrollment orientation webinar. We're going to talk about what's new, provide an overview of the program, talk about enrollment orientation, talk about what's next, answer any questions that you may have, and provide some information on a couple of additional opportunities. So we'll start with what's new. So with this notice, we announced 5 quarterly competitions starting July 1st, 2023 through September 30th, 2024, with 90 million available each quarter. This funding will be split up by making approximately $68.5 million available for transportation fueling facility applicants, 18 million for fuel distribution facilities, and $4.5 million for home heating oil distribution facilities. We also added home heating oil distribution facilities as a standalone applicant type. We define home heating oil distribution facilities as an entity with at least 80% of its throughput volume being home heating oil. We increased the federal cost share for eligible activities to 75% for transportation fueling facilities owning 10 or fewer stations and home heating oil distribution facilities. We also updated the cap cost for fuel dispensers and fuel storage tanks for transportation fueling facility applicants. Move on to the overview of the program. And we'll start out by providing an overview of the basics. So what does this program do? The purpose of HBIIP is to increase significantly the sales and use of higher blends of ethanol and biodiesel by expanding the fuel delivery infrastructure for higher blend fuels. This program is building on the success of the Biofuels Infrastructure Partnership from 2015 and was updated to build on the success of the 2020 and 2022 versions of HBIIP by adding home heating oil distribution facilities as a subset of fuel distribution facilities with a set aside. When we look at who can apply, there's really two main applicant types. The first is transportation fueling facilities, so fueling stations, convenience stores, hypermarket fueling stations, fleet facilities, including rail and marine fleets, as well as similar entities with capital investments. The other applicant type is going to be fuel distribution facilities, so terminal operations, depots, midstream partners, and similarly equivalent operations, including home heating oil distribution facilities. When we look at what funding is available, again, we're making up to $90 million available to eligible participants each quarter. Again, this is going to be split up with $68.5 million available to transportation fueling facilities, approximately $18 million available to fuel distribution facilities, and approximately $4.5 million available to home heating oil distribution facilities. And this is all for implementation activities for higher blends of fuel ethanol greater than 10% ethanol, including E15 and E85, and higher blends of biodiesel greater than 5% biodiesel, including B20 or higher. The terms of the grants are they'll cover up to 75% of the total eligible project costs, up to $5 million. As we discussed already on an earlier slide, transportation fueling facilities owning 10 or fewer locations and home heating oil distribution facilities are eligible for grants up to 75%. All other applicant types are eligible for grants up to 50%. The funds made available under HBIIP may only be used for eligible equipment, infrastructure, and related expenses to support the sales and use of higher biofuel blends. I want to talk about eligible project costs a little bit. Eligible project costs are those incurred after a complete application is submitted. This allows applicants to put deposits down on equipment to help manage supply chain issues and delays. It is important to note that no construction should take place until the agency has completed its environmental review and notified the applicant of such. It is also important to note that the applicant takes the risk of incurring costs and not knowing if they have been selected for funding. It's also important to bring attention to ineligible project costs. These are just some of the ineligible project costs. The full list is included in the notice. However, I just want to point out a few of these that we tend to get a lot of questions about. Renewable diesel projects are not eligible. Sustainable aviation fuel projects are not eligible. Also, expenses associated with applying for, reporting, reimbursement, and servicing of HBIIP are not eligible. So again, touching on when you can start ordering equipment, scheduling contractors, this can be done once the complete application has been filed. It's important to point out, I think, that selection notifications, obligations, grant agreement executions, et cetera, are expected to begin within approximately 90 to 100 days after the application window closes. We have to get through our reviews, make selections, those kind of things. So it does take a little bit of time for that process to play out. There is a matching funds requirement. Matching funds will need to cover the remaining balance that grant funds do not cover. Applicants may enter into arrangements with private entities, commercial vendors of fuels, agricultural commodity promotional organizations, tribes, and other entities interested in renewable fuels in order to secure such non-federal funds or in-kind contributions. There are several existing or prior and ongoing state-led programs and private sector efforts to help provide funding for higher blend dispensers, related equipment, and infrastructure. These programs may be included as part of any matching contribution requirement. However, the application must show how the HBIIP grant will add to the infrastructure that fosters biofuel sales and use. HBIIP funds are intended to provide additional incentives. So talking about matching funds a little bit more, again, they are required to receive an HBIIP grant. They need to cover all eligible project costs not covered by grant funds. They consist of cash and in-kind contributions. They must be secured by the applicant, so you must have written commitments, such as a bank statement for cash or letters of commitment for in-kind contributions. Matching funds must indicate the specific amount of funding provided and must indicate who they are for. Generalized matching funds letters are not acceptable. Pre-approved loans or loans in underwriting status are also not eligible matching funds. In-kind from applicants is not eligible. Other federal grants are not eligible. However, passive tax equity contributions is allowed. I want to touch quickly on the Build America, Buy America Act, or BABA. If you're applying as a state or local government, an Indian tribe, an institution of higher education, or a nonprofit, BABA could apply to you. We do have a consideration for geographical diversity. This is afforded to transportation fueling station owners based on the location of the proposed facility. These considerations include being located within 1 mile of the interstate corridor and being easily accessible, being the sole station in a 1 mile radius, being in the Western states. For purposes of this program, the Western states are all of the states west of the Mississippi, and being located in the New England states. And we also have a targeted assistance goal established for applicants owning the fewest number of transportation fueling facilities. This policy is rooted in agency experience. It was born out of a good number of comments submitted during the request for information published in January 2020 when we were preparing the program. It's intended to work in concert with the consideration for geographic diversity to distribute program funds more broadly across a greater number of states that may not otherwise participate. Approximately 80% of the fuel sales in the US are sold by convenience store owners. Moreover, about 58% of the stores selling fuel in the US are single store owners. We also recognize that most of the higher blend fuel is currently sold by large retail convenience store chains located in the Midwest and along the East Coast of the US, due in part because these are the types of businesses and locations with the highest densities of higher blend fueling infrastructure. We established this targeted assistance goal to distribute up to 50% of the transportation fueling facility funding among a greater number of business owners and perhaps indirectly across a broader geographic region, as previously mentioned. Our underlying expectation is that owner participants located in underserved areas today will be positioned as the higher blend fuel market leaders of tomorrow. We have a consideration for first-time applicants. So applicants who did not previously apply for HBIIP, were selected for funding and declined, or withdrew their application prior to returning the ancillary forms from the letter of conditions are all considered first-time applicants. We also have a consideration of rural development key priorities, including assisting rural communities recover economically from the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, particularly disadvantaged communities, ensuring all rural residents have equitable access to rural development programs and benefits from rural development funded projects. You can visit the link on the slide there for more information, www.rd.usda.gov/priority-points. So this all sounds great. How do we get started? You can visit the HBIIP website by going to rd.usda.gov/HBIIP, selecting the How to Apply button. then selecting the To Apply tab, and opening the checklist for online application system. So just showing you what that looks like from the website. If you go to it, you can select the How to Apply button. That'll bring you to this page. You can go to the To Apply tab and then open the checklist for online application system. We'll pause here quickly for questions.
We have no questions in the chat, Jeff.
Okay. We'll move on to enrollment orientation. We'll talk a little bit about Unique Entity Identifier, or UEI. We'll talk about USDA Level 2 e-authentication and login.gov, which will be coming soon. We'll talk about requesting access to the online application system and obtaining access to the online application system. So we'll start with the System for Award Management, or SAM. This is at sam.gov. When you go there, you'll want to make sure that you select to register your entity to obtain a unique entity identifier and an expiration date. You also want to make sure that you complete the certifications and representation section while registering your entity. It's important to note that when you do go to the SAM website, there's another option. It says Get a Unique Entity ID. This is not the correct choice and will not complete the verification process. So just keep that in mind when you're going there. So just showing you what this looks like. This is the SAM website. When you get there, you'll select Get Started. Here you can see it kind of tells you that you're either going to register your entity or get a unique entity ID. Just keep in mind to register your entity. That's the correct choice. Again, you'll just select Get Started. You'll also need to create a USDA e-authentication customer account. This can be done at www.eauth.usda.gov. You will need to get level 2 access or a verified identity. I'd also like to point out that USDA will be transitioning to login.gov later this month. It'll be optional, but you will be able to use a login.gov account if you have one instead of having an eAuth account. If you do have an existing eAuth account, it will give you the option to be able to combine them. So you will be able to carry your verified identity status into login.gov. So this is just showing you the e-authentication website. You'll need to select create an account. Once you have done this, this will give you level 1 access. From there, you can select Manage Account. You can select Update Account. And then this will take you into a screen that'll look something like this. It'll have your user information and then personal information before it. But over here in between those two boxes, there'll be a verified identity, such as what is shown if you have a verified identity. Otherwise, it'll say verify identity with a question mark and will be hyperlinked. You can select this to take a self-service online identity verification quiz. It'll ask you a few questions provided by a nationally known third-party identity proofing service. If you fail this or wish to verify your identity in person, you can contact your local USDA Service Center to set up an appointment with the local registration authority, or LRA. You will need to bring your government-issued photo ID with you, such as your state-issued driver's license. I also wanted to point out that there are additional resources available by selecting the Help drop-down and selecting FAQs. They've got some good information there if you need some assistance. So this is what the eAuth login page is going to look like once the transition has begun to login.gov. When you get here, you'll need to select that you're a customer. It'll bring you to a screen that looks like this. You'll either be able to select to either use login.gov or the eAuth option. If you already have a login.gov account, you will be able to log in with it and link it to your eAuth account. You can select the Need an Account, and this will allow you to create a login.gov account. So just showing you, it's a little small there, showing you where that is. That will take you to the login.gov site. You'll be able to create an account. This will require an email address, creating an acceptable password, and a secondary authentication method, such as an authentication app, SMS texts, etc. Just again, showing you a little better shot of what that looks like. Once you've done that, and you've logged into the eAuth page with your existing login.gov account or created a new account, you'll be directed to the eAuth site, and you'll be able to link to an existing eAuth account if you have one. So it'll give you the option there that you can select and combine those. From there, it'll ask you if you want to continue with login.gov, and you can select yes, and you'll be able to get in. So from there, you'll need to go back to the HBIIP website, to the To Apply tab, and open the HBIIP online access request. It'll look something like this. You'll need to select the request type. You'll want to select, put a yes for number 3 to create both a company account and user account if you're a new applicant, or put yes in number 4 to generate a new application and add user account if you're a previous applicant and need to generate a new application. You'll need your company's legal name, the company tax identification number, your UEI expiration date. You must identify the company as a specific applicant type by selecting one of the following options. They're all laid out there. Those are the different applicant types that we have. It's very important that you select the applicant type that is appropriate for your company. That selection determines the set of questions and instructions, worksheets, technical requirements, and priority scoring calculations in the online application system. It's also important to point out that hybrid applications, or those including both a transportation fueling facility project and a fuel distribution facility project, are not eligible. You can only apply for assistance related to one project type. You must also identify at least one authorized user in the table. If you're hiring a third-party grant writer, packager, or equipment installer to complete your application, make sure you include their information in the authorized user table along with your company information. You'll need to provide authorization. It's important to note that we've added this time to HBIIP at the bottom of the page, where the applicant entity can either sign off, authorizing the users to be able to access the system on their behalf, or if you're a grant writer and you have an authorization that you already have them sign, you can provide a copy of that, and we will accept it. It's also important to note that, just remember, if you've applied previously, you do need to submit an access request every quarter that you're going to be applying to generate that application. Otherwise, we have no way of knowing that you're trying to apply. So just keep that in mind. Once that's done, you'll need to request access to the HBIIP online application system. You'll send an email attached with a completed and encrypted HBIIP online access request to hbip@usda.gov. If you do encrypt your access request, you'll need to send a second email with the password so we can open it. And then please allow at least a week for us to process your request. If you do not receive a response after a week, please resubmit or reach out, and we'll try to check to see what's going on. Obtaining access to the online application system. So once your access request is processed, the company's authorized and rightful users will each receive an email from hbip@usda.gov with a URL to access the system and instructions for doing so. It's recommended that each user copy the URL and paste it into the address bar using a Google Chrome browser and hit enter. We also recommend bookmarking the URL for use should you need to access the online application system more than once. Please note that, depending upon your specific email client settings, the email that you get from us may go into your spam folder. So I would make sure you're checking there. And just one other note, we've had quite a few people reach out. When they try to log in, they get a bad request. If you get this, just enter the URL into the address bar again and hit enter, and that should take you in. I get the same thing sometimes, so we've had to make sure we understood what was going on. I'm going to touch briefly on some important dates. So the first date, June 28th, 2023, the notice was published in the Federal Register. This announced the quarterly HBIIP application windows and announced the changes to HBIIP. And then at the beginning of each quarter, we'll start accepting HBIIP online, the HBIIP online application system will go live for that quarter. We'll begin accepting online application or online access requests and preliminary environmental information surveys. Going back to the website, to the To Apply tab, there's some other documents that you can review and work on while you're waiting for your access. They're all listed there under the To Apply tab. The first one is the online application instruction guide. This is a helpful guide that can help walk you through how to complete the application in the system. Please note that it is currently in the process of being updated and will be added soon. We made a bunch of changes to the HBIIP system and are getting those incorporated into the guide. The next one is the project technical report guide, as well as a sample technical report. This guide provides information on the technical requirements necessary to complete the report. Please note that we do have that sample technical report posted, so that will give you an idea of what it should look like. Make sure you're grabbing the new documents. Pretty much everything has been updated from the last application window, so make sure you're getting the most updated version. And I think the final one to point out is the preliminary environmental information survey. All projects are subject to review under the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, and our Rural Development Instruction 1970. We will cover the environmental review process in a future webinar, but we wanted to point out the preliminary environmental information survey on the program website. Also under the To Apply tab, this document will need to be completed and submitted to the HBIIP@usda.gov email address, just like your access request. Please make sure that you are completing it thoroughly, providing detailed project descriptions, providing the required maps, and finally make sure that you sign the document. Once received, we will provide the documentation to our environmental review staff, and you will be contacted if additional information is needed. Once the environmental review has been completed, you will be notified. And only after you have received this notification can you begin construction activities. Any work done prior to that could jeopardize your ability to receive grant funding. And with that, we can pause for questions again.
Okay, we do have some questions. Let's kind of start with, there's quite a few questions on how they can get access to today's presentation, recording, PDF, kind of how that's going to be available. Do you want to?
Yep. That'll all be posted to the HBIIP website under the events tab. A copy of the PowerPoint should be posted yet this afternoon. I'm not sure how quickly we'll get the recorded webinar up. We have to make sure that it's 508 compliant and all those things. So it takes a little bit of time, but we'll get it up as soon as we can.
Can we go back to the matching fund slides, Jeff? There's some questions about matching funds.
Sure. Do you know which slide you want?
One of the questions, I think we need to get to that one that starts with the
And Jeff too, just so you know, you can go hover on the lower left-hand corner and there's
Mhm.
some options. And it might help you
Yes.
navigate.
Right there. Right there's the one we want, Jeff.
Okay.
So one of the questions is the matching requirement a dollar for dollar?
It depends. If you're in the category that is only eligible for up to 50% grant, then yes. If you're eligible for more than that, then no. That matching funds need to require the balance that the grant funds do not for the eligible project cost. So, you know, if you're in that 75% grant category, you only need to provide matching funds to cover 25%.
Another question is, can you explain the proof of matching funds requirement a little bit more?
Sure. So it depends what type of matching funds you're providing. If you're providing cash, you know, we'll want to see a bank statement or something that shows that there's over the required amount available. If you're, you know, using a loan or something like that to provide matching funds, we'll need to have an approval letter. Again, it can't be an underwriting, it can't be pre-approved, it has to be an approved with the amount and who the recipient is. That's the kind of documentation we're looking for. It has to be very specific in what it's providing. It can't just be a generalized letter from the bank saying that, you know, that they have matching funds available or something like that. We want to have very specific information made available so we can confirm that those funds are there.
Jeff, there's a question about the 75-50 grant eligibility. Maybe go over that again. Who's eligible for 75 and who's eligible for 50?
Yep. So there's only two applicant types that are eligible for 75% grant. It's going to be the transportation fueling facilities owning 10 or fewer stations and the home heating oil fuel distribution applicants. All other applicants are eligible for up to 50%.
Okay, there's some questions about starting a project, when you can start a project, how starting relates to permitting, permits received, permits applied for. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So it's important to note there's a couple differences in how we look at things. You know, like I talked about, you can incur cost once you submit an application. That's really just the intent is for you to be able to put deposits and those kind of things down and get equipment on the way, knowing that there's some long lead times, you know, those kind of things. Construction itself cannot begin until the environmental review is complete. You know, you can't move any dirt, you can't break ground, you can't do any of those kind of things until that's been completed. In terms of permitting and those things, you know, that's not dependent upon the environmental review. Those can move forward while the environmental review is being worked
on. There's a question here about, do you need to have both biodiesel and higher ethanol blends to be considered, or can it be one or the other?
Yes, good question. It can be one or the other. It just has to be, again, if you're doing ethanol, it has to be higher than 10%. If you're doing biodiesel, it has to be higher than 5%. But you do not have to do both in order to be eligible.
Okay, there's a question here. Is tallow and used cooking oil allowable feedstocks for the production of biofuel? I assume that's biodiesel.
Yeah, I mean, our concern is the percentage of biodiesel, not the feedstock that it comes from.
Another question relates to the UEI and how you renew it.
Yeah, so once the verification process has been completed and they issue an expiration date, it's good for a year. So once you're getting close to that, the end of that year, I believe at 90, 60, and 30 days out, they send an email to prod you along to renew it. As part of the letter of conditions that you're agreeing to, if you're selected for funding, you are agreeing to keep your SAM registration active throughout the life of the grant. So at least through final reimbursement, we need to have that active. We cannot, there's a lot of steps that we cannot do unless it's active. So you do need to stay on top of that. But yeah, essentially you're just going to log in to the system and verify that the information in there hasn't changed and renew it. That's, as long as nothing's changed, it's a pretty simple process.
Yeah, there's a question relating to home heating oil.
Mm-hmm.
Heating oil has a special carve out that runs up to 4.5 million. Will heating oil terminals, jobbers with tankage plans be able to be considered in other buckets if the 4.5 million gets exhausted beforehand?
Yeah, I mean, there's still a fuel distribution facility, so they're eligible under that. This was just a way to try to help them not have to compete against large fuel distribution facilities. It's hard for them to be competitive with when competing against some of those large distributors. And it's also important to note, that 4.5 million is there every quarter.
The next question relates to login.gov. Is it available now or will it be coming in the future? And once registered with login.gov, will we need the EOTH account?
So login.gov is not live for us yet. It should be coming around July 24th, unless it gets pushed back or something like that. It's going to kind of roll out in 3 phases. So at first, it's going to be totally optional for people to use. The second phase will be people will be encouraged to use it. And then the third phase is that you'll have to use it. So if you're using login.gov and you have an EOTH account, you can combine them. And if you do that, then you will not have to verify your identity within login.gov if you already have level 2 e-authentication access. That'll carry with it. If you don't have level 2 e-authentication access or a verified identity, you will have to do that within the login.gov system. I believe you have to take like a photo of your state issued ID and send it to them or upload it and ask you some questions, and you have to be able to answer those, similar to what you go through for level 2 e-authentication.
Will technical assistance and application review be available to applicants?
That's a good question. It's hard to say at this point. I mean, we'll try to help as much as we can, but the HBIIP team is small. So it just depends what time is available. I think if that's something that is needed, reach out and we can talk about it.
I think too, the additional webinars that we have will help
Yep,
touch
absolutely.
on some things.
I'm going to get to those here soon.
Is it eligible if it's a startup convenience store?
Yes. Yep. It doesn't have to be an existing location or an existing business. You can be a new business or a new location.
What are the key differences between a fleet facility, including rail, marine, and a fuel distribution facility?
So if you're a fleet, you're using the equipment to fuel your own vehicles. Think like Pepsi, they have infrastructure installed to be able to fuel all of their vehicles that they own and operate. That's a fleet facility.
Can you explain eligibility for an applicant with more than 10 locations? What's the reimbursement rate?
Reimbursement rate would be up to 50%. Is what you would be eligible for.
Who may apply? So eligibility is a biodiesel producer / plant eligible to apply for and participate in the HBIIP program? If so, what are the specific requirements that they need to meet in order to be considered?
So a plant wouldn't be eligible for production purposes. However, if they wanted to install, a card lock system with dispensers on their footprint or near their footprint on land that they own, that would be eligible as long as they were providing those blends of ethanol higher than 10% or biodiesel greater than 5%.
Is marine fueling station, tugboats, and barge fueling facility considered as a transportation fueling station and eligible under HBIIP? Excuse me.
Yes, it is.
Want to keep going, or do you want to finish the webinar?
We can get back to it. I don't have all that much left, I don't think.
Okay. Okay.
Get back to where I was.
Hey, Jeff, would you like me to go through the raised hands?
Sure.
All right. So Dean Barn, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself, and then you'll be able to speak. Mark Roach, you're next. So Dean, if you'd like to unmute yourself, you may now do so. Okay, Dean, we'll come back. Mark Roach, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself, it's in the lower left-hand corner on your bar there.
Hello, this is Mark Roush from the Auto Channel. Thank you for this presentation. It's very nice. The whole program is very exciting. Our question is that in order for alternative fuels, and specifically for biofuels, to really be successful, that the public must understand the benefits. And the public does not understand the benefits. I'm speaking specifically about ethanol and biodiesel, because there has been, 100 years worth of very terrible publicity, negative comments made by the oil industry about ethanol and biodiesels. And so there has to be some combating of that. There has to be some education for the public. So with your program, is there something that it will allow something like my company, which has been at the forefront of trying to educate the public about ethanol? And by the way, I'm the author of 2 books related to ethanol and the benefits of ethanol. One of those books is called The Ethanol Papers. It's a 600-page book. I didn't have that much to say, ha ha ha. So, and we need help to get the message out. So is there some part of your program that will help us to help get that message out? Because we need funding to make this happen. Thank you.
That's a good question. So the program does allow up to 10% of the grant award to be used as, it allows up to 10% of the grant funds not to be used for, but as match. You can use 10% of the match for marketing, which could include educational materials like that. However, that would be the applicants that would be getting that. It wouldn't necessarily be your company that would be able to apply for that.
Okay, so if, for example, we teamed with ethanol producers or station owners and our program was the educational program that was used, that might be acceptable.
That
Right.
could be considered as match, yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you. That's a very helpful information.
Thank you. All right, and we have Sam, and then Bill, you're up next. So Sam, you can go ahead and unmute yourself. It's in the lower left-hand corner, Sam. All right, we'll come back to Sam. Bill, if you want to.
Hello? Hello?
Hello.
Hello? Yeah, this is Sam.
Hi, Sam. We see you have your virtual hand up. Do you have a question for the panel today?
Yes, I was wondering, I have two sites I'm applying for. One of them is already operating, and one that I wanted to start a project right away. I mean, I don't want to wait 3 or 4 months to get a response. Either way, I'm doing the project. So I was wondering, is that something I can apply for and then start the project and see, if I get approved or not, or I can't start the project until then?
Yeah, so a project that would be done before you would be able to apply would not be eligible. However, you could apply for a location, and once the environmental review has been completed, you could go ahead and do the project before you know that whether you're selected or not for funding.
Okay, and as far as the 50%, so if the project costs, for example, does it go for the whole project? So if I'm redoing all my tanks, for example, do they go off that, or only for the tanks that it's going to be ethanol?
It would only be for the tanks that are going to be used for higher blends. It's only for higher blends infrastructure.
Okay. So if I'm doing new tanks or new lines and everything, they're going to only, basically, I'm going to get reimbursed 50% if I'm approved on only the portion of it that has anything to do with the E15 or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm. Correct. Yes.
Okay. And you said I can, if the environmental is done, how long does it take for the environmental to be done?
It depends what type of environmental review is required. If it's strictly equipment replacement, it could get done very quickly. If it's more in depth and in a floodplain and some of those kind of issues, it could require an environmental assessment, and those take about 6 months. So it just could be anywhere in between there. It kind of depends on the project itself. Go ahead.
And that doesn't start until the 90 days of the deadline passes, right? And then they start doing all that stuff. So the applications.
So we'll be able to start up on environmental reviews as quickly as we can get environmental review staff on board.
Okay.
But it's still it's not the fastest process. So just keep that in mind. It does take some time to work through.
But do they start, like, for example, if the deadline ends in 90 days from now, do they start, and we put the application today, for example, do they start working on the application in the system, or they don't start until the 90 days is over? That's what I'm...
Yeah, I mean, it depends where somebody would fall in the queue. If you got all the information in today and we had staff available to review it, they could start reviewing it today.
Okay, I see. All right. And so basically the key is to wait for the environmental to be done. Then you can start and kind of,
yes,
wait, see if you're approved or not.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Thank you, Sam. And Bill, you're up next, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, so I had a couple of questions. One is, first off, this process is so much easier than it was a few years ago when you had to do the standards and PORS number. But there's a lot of dealers that speak English as a second language. They're either from Latin America or from India. And they're just having, like, the actual part that you guys control, they don't have a problem with, and I can help them with. But just getting the entity registered has been just real difficult. In fact, a couple I haven't been able to get through there. Is there any consultant, or I know you guys have a small staff and you can't sit there and hold every single guy's hand, but is there any consultant or consultancy where a guy like me or these dealers could pay somebody to, walk through it. There are also a lot of guys that just really aren't very computer literate,
Yeah. So it really depends. I mean, there's a lot of grant writers out there that can help with that. I don't know that many of them are helping in HBIIP currently. I think there are some, but I don't know that all of them are. So it's really just finding somebody that has that experience and expertise to be able to assist with that. We can't make recommendations, so I can't really provide any names, but I know they're out there.
Okay, yeah, because what I've been told is there's a lot out there, but there's a lot that are kind of scam artist kind of guys, and I hesitate trying to make a recommendation to them when I don't know, exactly how it all works or what have you.
Understood.
Oh, and the other question was with our governor in California has gone out and said and literally passed a law saying there's not going to be any internal combustion engines allowed into California in 9 years. And so a lot of when this program was around a year ago and guys were applying, the lending environment was really aggressive and interest rates were low. And that was before that became official. So now all the lenders in California, petroleum properties are a difficult thing to lend on in the first place because of the underground tank liability and sometimes liquor law liability and 24-hour operation liability. It's made it so some of these projects that were going to be a go, now they can't get the financing for. If a guy applied and got approved under the last round, but he can't, come up with the money to do this, is it possible for him to reapply under the new rules with the 75%? It's mostly the guys with like less than 3 stations that are having this problem.
Potentially, it's covered in the notice on what the requirement is to be able to reapply, but essentially, as long as you haven't accepted a letter of conditions, then you could potentially withdraw and reapply. But we do want to see that the project is different some way, because we don't want people just to withdraw just to get more funding.
Well, yeah.
So you do have to, you're adding another dispenser, or, those kind of changes.
Yeah, and that they're typically doing that anyway, because since they can't afford it, they're taking a dispenser off or that sort of thing. So that's good. Thank you.
Yeah. And so with that, you would have to have an approved scope of work before you reapplied. And I've got a document that we use. You can reach out if you need that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Carrie, you should be, if you want to unmute yourself, you'll be allowed to talk.
Hi, yes, thank you. I'm a grant writer for HBIIP. And my first question is, if someone's not approved in one quarter, do they have to reapply the next quarter, or is their application pulled forward to the next quarter?
Good question. So if you're not selected for funding, your application will automatically roll over into the following quarters. However, keep in mind that especially if you're applying more than once, maybe a different set of locations the second time, that you won't know likely if that other application has been funded or not until probably a quarter has lapsed.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. All right. Another question. I actually have 2 more questions. Are grant writers' expenses covered costs?
No.
Okay. All right. And then what are the amounts allowed this year for dispensers and tanks versus what are the amounts allowed for California's tanks and dispensers?
So we'll have this in the user guide and in the system, obviously, when we get there. But essentially, what we're looking at is for an E15 dispenser, $50,000, an E85 dispenser, $63,000, E85 in California, $130,000, an E15 retrofit is $41,000, a B20 dispenser is $63,000, a B20 dispenser in California is $130,000, Ethanol storage tank is 168,000. Ethanol storage tank in California is 300,000. Biodiesel storage tank is 200,000. And biodiesel storage tank in California is 350,000.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carrie. All right, we have Kevin, and then Tim, you'll be up next, and then Chadney after that. Okay, Kevin, can you unmute yourself? Okay, we're gonna go ahead and go to Tim. Tim, it's gonna ask you to unmute yourself. If you'd like to ask the panel a question.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Hey, yeah, I just had two quick questions, and thanks for hosting this, by the way. It's super helpful and informative. So you had mentioned earlier that fuel distribution facilities, you gave a couple examples such as terminal operations and midstream partners. Do these facilities have to actually take title and ownership of these high blended fuels to be able to qualify, or can they be kind of third-party storage facilities that blend these high blends and then distribute to gasoline stations?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds like it would be eligible. I don't know why it wouldn't.
Right. And I guess my last question was, are there any kind of ongoing reporting obligations once approved?
Yeah, good question. So we require semi-annual reporting until the project is complete. Once the project is complete, we do require 5 years of annual reporting on volumes. And that's all outlined in the notice if you need more information on it.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, our last raised hand is Chadney. If you want to go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, good afternoon. Can you guys hear me okay?
A little faint, but we're
How about now? Better works the same?
better, yes. If you want to just as loud as you can would be great. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, so I have a question. So we have existing card lock facilities in California, and we have a couple of sites that we're looking to expand. So they're currently operational, but we want to add like additional fueling lanes. And that's my first question: would a project like that be eligible if you wanted to expand fueling capacity additional countries inside?
So it's a little hard to hear. I think I understood your question. So you're asking essentially if you can add to an existing facility to offer higher blends, and yeah, that would all be eligible.
Okay, excellent. And then another question is, I think similar to the last gentleman's question, we also have fuel rail terminals and don't have tankage on site now, but I do believe it sounds like if we had projects in line to install tanks that were like biodiesel specific, like B99, those projects would also be eligible, right?
Yeah, we'd probably have to talk through that a little bit more. That's kind of project specific for this, but potentially,
Okay.
we'd want to talk through the details.
Okay, and so to do that, I would just set up a time with you on
Yep.
details.
Yeah, you can just reach out and we'll set something up.
Awesome, perfect. Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks for the information.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, Abigail, if you'd like to ask a question, please unmute yourself.
Thank you. I work for Pearson Fuels, the largest E85 distributor in California. We've done some E85 work. I was wondering about reimbursements. Are you allowed to get reimbursed on multi-site applications after you complete the project?
Yeah, so it depends. You can start construction on one location once the environmental review is done, but we can't issue a letter of conditions or obligate funding until all locations have environmental reviews completed. So if you completed one location and wanted to submit for reimbursement before we had obligated funds and issued a letter of conditions, we wouldn't be able to process that reimbursement until they're all done.
Thanks, Jeff. Chadney, did that answer your question?
It does. I have another question
Right.
if you guys will take it.
Sure.
So it sounds like there are various grant writers on this. We can't see the attendee list, but is there a way to put, people like myself in touch with grant writers?
We don't maintain a list.
Okay.
We have to walk that fine line. We can't make it look like we're making recommendations or anything like that.
So just shout out my cell phone. Yeah,
That'd be it. That'd be the good way.
Yeah. Chadney Sean, Valley Pacific Petroleum. You can find me.
Valley Pacific.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Chad.
Thank you.
Houston.
And then we have, excuse me, Derek. You'll be allowed to speak if you want to go ahead and ask a question. Lower left-hand corner, Derek, and you can unmute yourself and ask directly. Okay, I do see you're off mute, Derek, but we cannot hear you as of now. But I think we have some time. Jeff, that's our last hand raise.
Okay.
So if Derek wants to raise it again and let me know that his mic's on, and we can go from there.
Okay, I've only got a few more slides, so we got time at the end.
Perfect.
So next I wanted to touch on important dates. So, in terms of what's next, the HBIIP application windows will close at 4:30 p.m. Eastern on the last day of each quarter. Once the window closes, the submit button will become inactive and applications can no longer be submitted. So it's important to note that, once the window closes, you will not be able to access the information you entered in the application system. If you think that you may not be able to get your application submitted, I would strongly recommend taking screenshots or something like that to capture that information if you are thinking that you might want to apply in a future window. Do just have the dates for the 5 windows that were announced. It's quarterly, so it just aligns with the federal fiscal year quarters. Once the windows are closed, we'll move into reviews. Again, these will take approximately 90 to 180 days from the date the application window closes. Following reviews, we'll make selections. We'll communicate with participants to let them know whether they were selected or not for funding. Once we've got some obligations, we'll make a public announcement, those kind of things. We do have a series of webinars that we're going to provide. I'm having a hard time trying to find dates and times that work well, so I'm just going to record them and have them posted to the website instead of hosting live events. So keep an eye out for those. Those will all be on the HBIIP website under the events tab. I'm not sure how soon I'll get those all done and posted, but we'll get them up as quickly as we can. I'm going to skip this slide. I want to talk quickly about a couple of additional opportunities, and then we can entertain any final questions. So first, I want to talk about the Rural Energy for America program quickly, or REAP as we call it. REAP did receive $2 billion in funding through the Inflation Reduction Act. It provides financial assistance to ag producers and rural small businesses to make energy efficiency improvements or to install renewable energy systems. Has 2 different types of funding with it. It has guaranteed loans that can cover up to 75% of the eligible project cost, up to $25 million. It also has grant funding that will cover up to 50% of the eligible project costs. For energy efficiency improvements, there's a maximum of $500,000, and for renewable energy systems, there's a maximum of $1 million. Eligible applicants are going to be those small businesses as defined by the SBA small business size standards that are located in an eligible rural area. For us, typically that's going to be a population area of 50,000 or less. Also, ag producers with more than 50% of their income coming directly from ag operations would be eligible. A couple examples as I think through HBIIP and REAP and how they might work together. If you're making improvements to your convenience store, and you know, while the tank's being installed and you're kind of shut down and out of whack. Anyway, you can, you know, if you have the ability to do so, you could, you know, upgrade refrigeration and freezer equipment, commercial kitchen equipment, lighting upgrades, HVAC systems. On the renewable energy side, you know, if you wanted to put solar on top of your canopy, something like that, that would be eligible. Plant retrofits for ethanol and biodiesel plants are potentially eligible, and you can find more information on the website there, as well as a state contact by using the Contact Your State Energy Coordinator button. And then I also want to touch quickly on the Business and Industry, or BNI, Guaranteed Loan Program. This provides financial assistance to rural businesses for things like business expansion, purchase of machinery and equipment, debt refinance, et cetera. Again, it offers a guaranteed loan up to $25 million. Eligible applicants are going to be those businesses located in rural areas. And the link there will get you more information. With that, I'll put up contact information and entertain any other questions that there are.
Can we just quickly go to that last hand raised? Where I'm going to ask Derek if he can unmute himself, and let's see if we can hear him.
Hi guys, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Perfect. Just a quick question. Are above ground tanks acceptable for the program?
Yes.
Perfect. And then quick question regarding one of the last slides for reimbursement. Sorry, I'm echoing. Would feedlots pertain to that funding for grants for the last slide that you guys had put up?
For the Rural Energy for America program?
Correct.
Yeah. I mean, as long as they're a small business as defined by the SBA small business size standards and in an eligible rural area, they would be eligible.
And of course, does Western states take precedent in that category?
Not with REAP, no.
Okay.
That was strictly for HBIIP. Yep.
Sounds good. And then just the portion regarding tanks, the applicant can use cash funds for the match.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Correct.
Sounds good. Well, thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Jeff, we do have one more hand raised. Do you mind?
Yeah, go ahead.
Guy, if you want to go ahead and ask your question.
Outside.
Yes,
That's sorry, Guy. That apologize, Guy, one more time. Guy, we're gonna have to come back to you, Guy. I apologize. We'll get you back on here. You should have a prompt that asks you to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Sorry about that. My question is, can successful previous HBIIP applicants resubmit new upgrade projects under this announcement?
Yes. Yep. You can reapply if you were a previous awardee.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you very much.
No problem.
That does it for the raised hands, Jeff.
Okay. Lisa, are there any questions in the Q&A?
Yes. Hybrid project applications are not accepted. However, does that mean an entity can only apply for one project type per quarter, or can an entity submit multiple project applications a quarter?
An applicant can only submit one application per application window. So you'd have to, choose which path you wanted to go down if you were looking at both options.
Will the portal close temporarily at the end of each quarter submission window before reopening for the next window?
So the application window will close. The portal doesn't close. The application window will close, and you won't have the ability to submit after 4:30 p.m. Eastern on the final day of the quarter. And then the window will reopen at 12:01 a.m. Eastern. However, you won't be able to access the information that you had entered on an application already. and you'll have to submit a new access request, and we won't accept those until the first day of the new quarter. So you won't be able to get in and work on anything right away. Any additional questions, Lisa?
Yeah, I was just sorting through some of
Okay.
these. There's some more questions on the environmental review process.
Mhm.
Do you maybe want to summarize that again?
Yeah, I want to get into the weeds on it. If you have those questions and want to have a more in-depth conversation about it, please reach out. But essentially, once you're going to need to complete the preliminary environmental information survey and submit it to us, we will acknowledge the receipt of that, and that email is what you can upload into the application portal instead of uploading all the environmental review documents, because those can get quite large sometimes. What we use that survey for is to determine the likely level of review. So unfortunately, environmental work isn't real black and white. There's a lot of gray area, and it kind of depends on how one question maybe triggers another question, and some of those things to be able to determine the likely level of review. But once we have that likely level of review determined, we'll let you know what is necessary, if anything else is necessary. So if it's like I said before, if it's just strictly equipment replacement, that's likely not going to need much additional from you. If it's new ground disturbance or new construction or those things, it's probably going to require an environmental report or an environmental assessment. Those take quite a bit more work. Yeah, I think that's probably about all we need to get into on that.
I'm just reading through them. I think we're pretty well through them. Are bulk plants, terminals, storing, blending, and dispensing ethanol or biodiesel eligible?
Yes.
I think maybe you touched on that.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've pretty well got them, Jeff. I think we've covered most of these.
Great. Yeah, if you have additional questions, if you have project-specific stuff that you want to talk through, please reach out. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. With that, I think that's all we have. I appreciate everybody's time. Thank you. Have a great day.